Hello and welcome back to the Little Craft House. Today I decided to make some earrings using alcohol ink, something that I haven't used for a while. So alcohol ink on polymer clay. So I thought I'd bring you guys along, show you how I made them and give you some of my tips and tricks along the way. Right, so I have gathered my supplies up. I've got my range of alcohol inks here. I wasn't 100% sure on the colour combination I was going to do when I grabbed them out, so I went with some pinks, some purples and some oranges. I thought they would all go in kind of nicely together. I didn't end up using the orange though, so we're just going to pretend that they're not in the image here. I've also got some gold and some white inks as well. And then we're going to be using the white polymer clay. So I'm going to use souffle today. And I've also got a little air puffer here that's going to blow the inks around. And I nearly forgot, I've also got some blending solution. Blending solution is a weaker version of isopropyl alcohol, and I prefer to use this to the isopropyl because I find that it's just not quite as harsh as isopropyl. It helps to make the inks move and flow nicely without that real sharp cutting through that the alcohol can sometimes do. Right, so I'm just going to start prepping my clay. So as I mentioned before, this one is the souffle clay. You can use Primo or Fimo or Cernet or whatever you like. Souffle is just my preference. So I'm going to get it all nice and conditioned up and then rolled out. I'm going to pop it through the pasta machine and put it on a level about 2 millimeters thick. So normally when I make my earrings, I go around 3 millimeter. These ones are going to have resin on top, so I'm going to just take them down just slightly to start with, so that it's not quite as thick. The clay's not quite as thick to start with, because once we add the resin and then I'm going to probably add some charms and things, I don't want them to be too heavy. I'm just going to trim around the edges a little bit just to make it a nice even square to start our design on. I'm just going to chop these bits off, and of course I'm just going to put the scraps aside or use them later. And something that I do like to do whilst working with the alcohol ink is put my clay onto a piece of baking paper. It just makes it easier to move it around and also helps a little bit with the mess if the alcohol goes off the clay. That way it's not going to stain my tile, because believe me, it will stain. All right, so even though I'm not using the orange, I'm going to just show you here. We've got to give our alcohol inks a really good shake. They separate within the bottles, so we want to make sure we've given them a really good shake so that way the effects and the colour all mixes in nicely. So usually they have a little ball inside. Keep them shaking until you can hear those balls moving really freely. I also like to start by taking off all the caps, because then that way it's just easier to go with the flow whilst creating. I'm not worrying about putting caps on and off. Sometimes I will leave the caps of my gold and other metallic-y ones. Sometimes I'll leave the lids on those because I'll shake them just before using, but I am going to take them off today. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to put down a layer of the blending solution. I like to refer this as kind of like a bit of a waterbed. So it's going to give something for those inks to flow nicely in. When you put them down and they do that little blooming effect, it works really nicely if you've got that layer of blending solution down. If you don't have blending solution, you've got the isopropyl, that's totally fine as well. But yeah, as I've mentioned earlier, I like the effect better with the blending solution. So I'm just using my finger to smooth it out all across the clay so that it's got a nice even coating. And then when I put the inks down, you'll see what happens. See how it just starts to move nicely. So it just starts doing that little bloom. So just going to randomly pop down each of these colours now. And I didn't realise at the time, this one here is actually a stays in place one, so it's actually not going to do that bloom effect. That one just takes a little bit more to get moving and to add just to get it to move and to flow and blend. With the white, you'll sometimes hear people refer to whites as being a sinker ink. That's because white, or most white inks, all the white inks I've come across, they're all a heavier pigment within them, so they actually sink down and go to the base of your artwork. So I've put it over the top of the golds here because the gold likes to kind of come to the top, likes to float more, and then it tends to overtake. So I figure by putting some white on the top of the gold, it doesn't let it overtake quite as much. And I'm just using the puffer just to move those inks around now. And I really want to get that gold moved through it. I don't want them just as sitting there as circles. So I'm just adding more colour as I go, and yeah, just re-liquefying it by adding more colour. So something that you do want to be really careful is not to add too much. I'm really pushing the limits with my design today. I add quite a lot, but yeah, you don't want to add too much because otherwise your clay, it starts to affect the clay and starts to kind of break down the clay, and it begins to be a bit gummy and sticky, and yeah, it doesn't end up being very fun to work with once you get to that cutting point. So just be aware not to put too much alcohol on. So these little air puffer blowers that I'm using at the moment, they're so handy to have. If you're in Australia, we have them on special in our store at the moment, which is thelittlecrafthouse.com.au. They're on special at the moment on the website, but if you don't have one, you can always just use a straw and manually blow the straw to move your inks around. Be careful though, you don't want to breathe in the fumes of the alcohol. It will give you a headache, and yeah, long-term effects aren't great. So just try not to breathe in those fumes, but blowing with the straw will also work. So I'm really happy with how this has turned out now. I much prefer how the gold has gone a bit more veiny throughout the design rather than being in those clumps. I will say though that in this lighting, those colours are looking a lot darker than what they actually are. It is a lot more lighter, and especially on different angles, it's kind of darker on one angle as the light catches it and more pastel on the other. So in the next frame, you'll see it looks really light because it's later in the day when the next bit's filmed, and so the lighting tended to change, but that's why it looks a little bit more pale. So yeah, there we go. It looks really pale there, but believe me, there is some colour to it. It's kind of in the actual in-between of what we just saw before and what we're seeing now. So I did leave it for a couple of hours to dry just because there was so much ink on there. You can still see as that light catches it, there is still some wet spots on there, but that's okay. We're still going to cut it. Yeah, some of those pinks, depending on how the light catches, whether it's looking darker or more pastel colour. So yeah, my preference would normally be to let it dry completely before cutting, but you don't have to. It's going to go in the oven, and that's going to assist with the drying as well. So I'm just trying to avoid that light. I have to have my lights on in this room. It's so dark, but it's just really reflecting on the clay. Okay, so shapes. I decided just to go super simple with the shapes that I'm cutting out today, mainly just because I want these colours to speak for themselves, and of course I flipped it. Also, I'm going to add a few little charms and things to go with it as well. So just really simple shapes to cut them out. When I've worked with alcohol inks on the polymer clay in the past, I've had a few questions about the baking process and if it's okay for alcohol inks to go into the oven. The answer is yes, it is completely fine for our artwork to go in the oven. The alcohol element of the alcohol inks has evaporated. So that's why we leave it a little bit to dry. If you've ever poured the alcohol inks into some sort of open container to paint with or to use from there, you'll notice how quickly the actual alcohol evaporates. So what's left is just our colours and any sort of staining that's occurred onto the polymer clay. So completely fine for baking. A couple of things that we do want to watch out for though is we don't want to leave our clay too long before baking. So I've left this for a few hours to let the ink dry. I wouldn't leave it days. We don't want the clay and the design to start cracking, which can happen because of the alcohol that's been put on top of it. So yeah, we just want to have it cut and baked as soon as we can, really. We just don't leave it sitting around. Something else just to note is that depending on the alcohol ink that you use, you may get a bit of fading happen during the baking process. So obviously different alcohol inks will react differently with the heat. I use both the Couture Creations brand and the Pinata brand, and I've not had any issues with those fading during that baking process. And I've not had many issues with the colour fading or colour changing over time either. I do have some earrings that I made a couple of years ago. The colours are still just as good as the day that I made them. So it really comes down to storage and care that's taken once your pieces are complete to how they will last. Okay, so I'm going to pop this scrap piece to the side. I have a couple of ideas of things that I might try to do with that scrap. I can't clean the ink off because it has stained it, but I'll either just scrunch it up and mix it all in and just have a new pinky coloured clay, or I might try and make a bit of a design with it. Depending on what I do, I will post it probably onto Reels or Shorts section here on YouTube. Okay, time for these ones to go into the oven. So I'm going to bake these ones for probably about 45 minutes. That should be enough for these because they are a little bit thinner than my usual earrings that I make. Right, so there we go. Magic of editing is they are all baked up and they are looking great. So you can see that beautiful shine that's on there and some dirt. Let's get that off. It's got the beautiful shine from the glittery inks that I used. Didn't realise at the time, but yeah, one of them was a glittery one. And the gold looks beautiful throughout. So before I go and sand them and drill them, I'm going to give them a coat of resin. So if you've followed my tutorials before, you know I'm not a huge fan of UV resin, but I needed these ones to be done quickly. So I'm just going to use the UV resin. I've gone into the other room where it is darker. There's no natural light coming through. The natural light will set the UV resin, so we don't want that. So yeah, sorry about the shadowing and darkness here. So obviously resin is an option. You don't have to use resin. It is a toxic chemical, so please be careful whilst using it. Resin gives the alcohol ink a really beautiful shine. It really brings out the colours and the elements, especially of the glitter and of the metallics. Yeah, it really just enhances it and makes it look amazing. But if you don't want to use resin, you can just use a gloss. You don't have to use anything. But if you do choose to use something, you need to make sure that it's compatible with both polymer clay and alcohol ink. You don't want something that's going to reactivate the ink, and you don't want something that is going to make your polymer clay all sticky and yucky. By using some sort of sealant, it is going to protect and help the longevity of the colours of those inks, but if you would prefer just to leave them as is, that's fine. It's not going to come off. The inks have now stained the clay, so those colours are on there. They won't wipe off. I mean, maybe if you get some alcohol and scrub them, they might, but I mean, who's going to be doing that? But yeah, I always like to just give them the resin coating because it just brings out those elements within. And because I don't use UV resin very often. I don't have a UV lamp, so I will be taking these out to the sunshine, which is very minimal today, so it's going to take a little bit longer for these to cure as well. So I'm just going to push the resin to the edges. A question I quite often get asked about resin is, do I do the sides and the backs? No, I don't. I just do the top to give it that domed effect. The resin is self-leveling, so it's not going to just run over the edge unless you put too much on. So it's better to put less on and then slowly add more rather than putting too much on to start with, because we don't want it running off the edge. You'll get in a huge mess and everything will just stick together. Okay, so my pieces are now cured. They have that beautiful shine to them. Look at that, they look really good. I'm going to go and take them now and sand around the edges and drill the holes. So I will go and do that and then we'll be back to assemble them. Okay, so time to assemble. I thought I would just go with these simple ball studs for the top. I've got my pliers there, some jump rings and the charms. Now, these ones weren't the original charms I was thinking of, but I actually really like the look of them and I've never used them before. So I'm going to use them for one of the pairs today. Right, so whilst I am assembling these, I just wanted to give you guys a little heads up that if you enjoy watching my earring making tutorials, I've got something coming up which is quite exciting. Now, I'm not allowed to give away any details at the moment, but if you can keep your eyes and ears peeled, over the next couple of weeks, mainly on Instagram, I'll be promoting it. So make sure you follow me over there if you're interested in finding out what it is. I also share other reels and tutorials over there too. So follow me over on Instagram. I'll let you guys know when this thing is happening. I'm not allowed to say too much at the moment, but yeah, if you enjoy doing earrings, making polymer clay earrings, and you enjoy my tutorials, I think you will be excited about what I've got going on. Okay, back to this tutorial. That is not sitting right. That's really frustrating because I wanted it to hang nicely, I think because the top's too wide. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of glue underneath of it. It'll make it permanent, but I think I'm going to be keeping this pair for myself anyway. So yeah, I think I'll pop some glue underneath of it so that it sits straight in the exact spot that I want it to sit, because I really like it and I've decided that I'm going to use it. So we are pretty much at the end of today's tutorial. Thank you heaps for joining me. Hope you've had fun. Hope you've enjoyed watching me make these earrings. It's been a while since I've used the alcohol inks with the clay, so I've really enjoyed doing this. I think I'm definitely going to have to do some more in the future as well. If you've enjoyed today's tutorial, I would love for you to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, because that way you won't miss out on any of my future tutorials. And if you do make some alcohol ink earrings for yourself, please make sure you tag me in it because I love to see your creations. So thank you once again for joining me and I'll see you again next week. Bye!